Hi, everybody. I'm here today to talk to you about seance science. So, I've been telling you all month that there is science behind seances, and we're going to get into it today. And I'm like really excited about it. So, there is so much going on with this that I actually cannot fit it all into one video. So, we're going to break it down into at least two. Yeah, we're going to get started on some interesting things today. So basically, back in Victorian times when seances were kind of at their peak, it was a time of science. There was a lot of discoveries happening. People were inventing things and doing a lot of research to learn about all of the things around them and how to do things. And so seances ended up kind of being the focus for a lot of scientists trying to figure out what was happening and what happens when we die, and do these people that say that they're mediums actually have some kind of psychic ability, and how does that work, and things like this. So it was really kind of a fascinating time, I imagine. So basically, these seances that are spiritualist seances were kind of started by the Fox sisters, who moved into a house. They were young girls, and they moved into a house, and they started to hear knocking. And over time, they decided to see if they could get the knocking to respond to them. So they would snap, and they would say, "Can you do this?" And they would snap once, and it would knock once, and then they would do it twice, and it would do it twice. And eventually they started asking questions, going through the alphabet and getting answers, and communicating. And people came from like all over to talk to these girls and to try to communicate with spirits. Now, if you know anything about the Fox sisters, you may know that they did recant um, these stories. They did say that they were the ones doing the knocking. However, some people still believe, and the Church of Spiritualism was formed on what went on with these girls. So that is the foundation. And so I don't really know, but the very interesting thing for me with this is that 4 years before the knocking started for the Fox sisters, the electric telegraph was invented. So it was kind of believed at this time that the spirit knocking was kind of a spiritual telegraph. So it was doing a similar thing to what the electric telegraph was doing, and so people kind of found this as a valid way to communicate because of that. So that's kind of interesting. Now, Michael Faraday was a scientist. He was an English scientist, and he studied electromagnetism and electrochemistry. And he was a staunch non-believer in mediums, in psychic abilities, in these seances, and he set out to disprove them. So he started with table turning, and he did a couple of cool experiments. In one, he invented a machine that measured movement, any kind of movement, and he determined that even the slightest amount of pressure from your hands on a table could cause it to move. So he felt that table turning was just completely bogus. He also did a really cool experiment where he took cardboard pieces, he cut them out. They started like the size of a table, and he lightly glued them together, and they got smaller as they went up. So basically a pyramid. And he got people to put their hands on them, and his thought process was that if it was spirit that was moving it, the pieces of cardboard would move from the bottom up, and if it was people doing it, then they would move from the top down. And in every experiment that he conducted using this method, they were moved from the top down. So he determined that either outright fraud was happening, or this was a result of the idiometer effect, which is where our muscles move independently without deliberate thought. So it's like subconscious, very slight muscle movements in our hands. And this is what people also believe happens with Ouija boards and pendulums and things like this. So that was his assertion, and he felt that he completely disproved table turning. And yeah, so an interesting thing is that he studied electromagnetism, which is what we look for now on investigation. So we measure electromagnetic fields now, and he was such a non-believer, and now we're using stuff that he discovered on our paranormal investigations, which is really cool. And there's also the Faraday pouch, which we put the spirit box in to block the radio signals. So I wonder what he would think if he knew that his stuff was being used to conduct paranormal investigations now. He probably is rolling over in his grave. If we could communicate with him, that would be an interesting conversation. So next we're going to talk about Sir William Crookes, who was a really avid believer in spiritualism. He was a scientist, and he set out to discover psychic force, basically. So he invented something called a radiometer, which actually proved that light could move objects in a vacuum. So this is just scientifically cool. But he also felt that the radiometer responded to mediums. So it would turn through psychic force when a medium was near it. That was his belief. He also invented something that he called a self-registering instrument. So it basically measured movement where there was mediums around. So to see like what they were doing with their mind, basically. And he felt that it registered traces of psychic force, and he like set out to prove this, to really measure it, and he may have fallen down a bit of a rabbit hole with it. So he studied quite a lot of mediums in his time, trying to figure out psychic force. But he, by other scientists, was considered generally quite gullible and easy to trick. And he also had eyesight problems, and he did not wear glasses when he was doing most of his experiments with psychics and mediums and these seance leaders. So they kind of believed, other scientists believed that that he was like really just easily being tricked, or that he was in cahoots with some of these people committing outright fraud. So he was largely dismissed by the scientific community. And when he tried to submit his work, it was totally dismissed. So because of that, he joined the Society for Physical Research, and he did become the president of it. He also joined the Ghost Club and the Theosophical Society, and he was initiated into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn before his death in 1919. So he had like a really interesting kind of spiritual journey. But as far as the scientific community was concerned, he was a fraud. He was kind of a joke, and nothing that he kind of discovered within spiritualism was believed. So it's really unfortunate, and this is kind of what lays the groundwork for science and spirit to this day. Most people that are really invested in the science behind this stuff, trying to find like some kind of physical proof, are dismissed and believed to be crazy or gullible, or something negative, fraudulent. So it does make it hard, and it makes it hard that the science that he was working on was not ironclad. So we can't really say without a doubt that the things that he discovered were real or not, because there's too many questions there. So it's kind of hard. But yeah, that's what I have for today. And tomorrow we're gonna get into some more stuff about some other things with the science behind seances. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. And otherwise, I'll talk to you tomorrow with some more seance science. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.